I'd like to call this meeting to order. Mr. Walsh, would you lead us in the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sunshine Law Statement. All requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act have been met for this meeting of the Board of Education of the Borough of Oradell. Notice of this meeting was filed with the Record and Town News, and all persons requesting such notice. Mr. Darian, would you read the mission statement?
The Oradell Public School is dedicated to the ongoing pursuit of educational excellence through comprehensive, innovative curriculum and instruction. The district is committed to providing opportunities for social, emotional, and academic discovery to foster curiosity, courage, and character. Our goal is to prepare our students to become lifelong learners who are self-sufficient, resilient, productive, responsible citizens.
Thank you. Roll call.
Here.
Mr. Griffin?
Here.
Ms. Levy?
Here.
Mrs. Norian?
Here.
Mrs. Shapiro?
Here.
Mrs. Walker?
Here.
Mr. Walsh?
Here.
Dr. Westlake? Mrs. Watson?
Here, open to the public for agenda items only. Not seeing any, we will move on. Tonight we have our architects with us to give us an update on the construction. So we don't want them to have to wait till later, so we're going to have you go first.
Thank you so much. So good evening. My name is Greg Somjan with Perrette Somjan Architects. David Didymamoff, the lead project architect, is here with me as well. We were asked to come in and just give you an update, answer some questions about the additional work that may be contemplated, and then certainly we can address anything else that you might have. So project is progressing nicely. The early stages, you may have heard, we had some delays with the building department issuing the permits, so we had to put an elaborate letter together to address the construction officials' questions about certain things related to the barrier-free compliance. Once we outlined all the statutes and the references and the code citations, the permit got issued, the contractor was able to start. The construction demolition is, generally speaking, 98% done. The walls were framed, the walls were closed, sheetrock is installed, spackle is installed, mechanical equipment is hanging from the ceiling, some of the ductwork is already in place, and the next steps are basically going to be to wrap up the ductwork. The rough electric is done, and then essentially they will be able to paint, put the finishes in, carpet, things of that nature. The doors are already in place, the frames, and ultimately I think they are on target to be done in about plus or minus 30 days. Interestingly enough, today was supposed to be their substantial completion date, but if we take the same number of days that they were delayed by the building department and add them on, it'll take us into the middle to the end of October. But they're making great progress. They're, generally speaking, an easygoing contractor to work with. So that was, as we mentioned, you had asked me very early on when we first presented, and sometimes you are straddled with a very difficult contractor, but generally speaking, the contractor is doing a nice job and relatively easy to work with. As school progresses, Dr. Ansel and I have spoken to them about the requirements and the need to stay away from students and to have the background check of the supervisor that's going to be on site and to provide the list of the client or the workers that are going to be on site. So again, things are progressing very nicely. If you've not had a chance to go down there, I'd recommend not going with your nicest pair of shoes, but if you want to go down there, it's still a little dusty, but the space is very nicely coming together, and it's very easy to see where the spaces are, including the brand new bathroom that is now going to be down there. As part of the project's progress, there were some requests of us to look into some additional work that was not originally contemplated. And so we looked into work within the hallway that included new finishes and replacing some equipment in the hallway as it relates to mechanical systems. And so we are in the process. We have some numbers from the contractor already, and we're still waiting on some other pricing as well. And then obviously the board will have to make a decision whether they want to spend that additional money to do that additional work. I think that's a pretty basic overview of everything that is going on. If there's something specific that you'd like me to drill down on, I'm happy to do that, or I'm happy to answer specific questions.
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
So, I can't recall the exact date, but when we first started construction, I think in June, the 21st or the 12th, I think it was the agenda where we approved. At that point, somewhere before that meeting, we realized that the hallway was not in scope of the project that was set out to bid. And, you know, we get it, things like that happen. And when we approved the contract, $388,800, we added an additional $15,000 that would cover expenses associated with the hallway. At that time, we really didn't discuss what those expenses would cover, the $15,000, and we found out later that it only covers the flooring. So, you know, we had made discussions at that time, you know, general discussions where the hallway was going to be at the same level of finish, fit and finish, and construction remodeling like the new space. It doesn't make any sense, you know, from our perspective, to go into an old hallway and then go into a new space. So we wanted to ensure that it was at the same level of construction. So since that meeting, we've had conversations about, you know, what would be involved in the hallway. And to your point, we talked about a couple of mechanical systems, like I believe there was fountains that were there that haven't been used in many years. They would have to be replaced. That involves time and money. We talked about adding a doorway in the middle of the hall to separate out the mechanical rooms, the boiler, the maintenance rooms from the instructional space. Also, during the winter, the cold air wouldn't permeate through the entire hall. But one thing that was always, we never did get a grasp on is the heating and air conditioning for that space. And just to state on record, you know, we've had several versions of drawings, and each subsequent version of drawings still didn't address the underlying concern, which is we want to have the same level of conditioned space as we have for the rest of the basement. So can you give us an update, because I still don't know, you know, what solution we're providing for the hallway, what does that entail, and, you know, approximately how much that would cost us.
Sure. I want to just clarify one thing. You referred to we, 15,000, and discussions. That reference is to the board internally, because up until recently, that was not a conversation that I recall was having included us. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, I don't remember, and when I said we, I mean, I'm assuming that someone within your office was involved, but I didn't speak to David on this issue.
Okay.
Or you directly.
Okay.
I just know that we had discussed the hallway, and a $15,000 amount was discussed, and we approved it at the June meeting.
So let me share with you what I know.
Okay.
When we started the process, you may recall it started as a master planning exercise. We went through the entire building. We looked at a whole host of spaces to do various things with, including trying to incorporate, without adding on to the building, additional space. And we looked at the one classroom that had 2 doors into it and a host of things. Ultimately, the directive after we presented that master plan was, we're going to focus our energies, based on the budget that we have, on the basement spaces, which included a renovation of the teacher's lounge and improvements for the professional development area, storage, the tag room, a new restroom, and spaces like that. We didn't want to push special ed students down there, so it does make sense to bring that space back. we'll put some kind of gifted and talented spaces down there. And so when we talked about that, we developed a budget, and the budget included that space only. And we recognized that the district was very conscious about the money that they wanted to spend. And if you recall, we even came before you to talk through the budget that we had presented because there was a concern about how much are we going to spend on just this one area. So at the time, while I completely understand the desire to beautify everything, the hallway was never discussed as part of the original scope, and it was primarily for a budgetary reason. We were looking to make renovations to the existing space to make them usable. But I completely understand the desire to improve that adjacent space as well. So the original drawings that we were preparing were going to be limited to that area. Then I believe maybe a week before we were out to bid, there was a request for us to include the aesthetic upgrades of the hallway itself, which included flooring. And again, that was an attempt kind of at the 11th hour to include it. So that was included in our base bid, correct?
No, that was as an alternate.
Oh, that was an alternate.
That was,
Right. So, and do we accept the alternate as part of the base bid? Okay. That's
yes,
the 15.
that's what I'm talking
Okay.
about, yes.
So now it's making sense. So the drawings and the contractor bid on a project that had detailed information associated with the classrooms along the windows and based on the request to add the flooring into the hallway. So that's where that 15,000 came from. That's included in the award that you made. That's how we got to that point. More recently, I guess there was a desire to make further improvements to the hallway. There were discussions about adding some doors into the hallway, and there were discussions about the existing mechanical equipment. Right now, the hallway has some cabinet heaters. I'm led to believe they may or may not be working, and specifically cabinet heaters are heaters that will provide a small amount of warm air to offset areas near doors where when you open them, you get a rush of cold air over the winter months. Cabinet heaters don't really do very much during the summer months for cooling. Generally speaking, a hallway doesn't have its own mechanical equipment because it's contained within the building. Generally, you have not only walls, but you have classroom spaces or other heated and cooled spaces on either side, so there's no real need to do that. The natural transfer of air when doors open and close will really create the necessary space heating and or cooling in the hallway that's appropriate. So one of the requests that came in was, well, if we're going to do all this stuff, can we add air conditioning to the hallway? I can tell you that's not a bad idea because based on our climate change, what we are seeing is that even the hallways historically have never had any kind of conditioned space because of the excessive moisture that is coming along with humid days and things of that nature. Adding some air conditioning into hallways helps dehumidify the air a little bit, take the moisture out. And so there are school districts that are looking to contemplate that, but that always comes as a price. So in response to the request, we looked at a design that had a cassette unit. And a cassette unit is typically a standalone unit that provides cooling from a central location, probably one of the most cost-effective ways to introduce it. Then there was a discussion and a request to, instead of putting in an isolated cassette unit, to add ductwork so that the cooling would be distributed more evenly throughout the hallway. We modified the design. There were changes, and those changes were given to the contractor, and ultimately the conversation continued that a request came in that now can we add heating to that unit as well. So that would be a completely different design, and so the contractor stopped pricing the cassette alternate. I believe that for the cassette alternate price, he was around $20,000 but never formalized it because he was waiting for some final decisions. I'm not sure that heat is necessary in the hallway for the reasons I've already stated. It's rare that you would put heat into a hallway, if anything. What we are seeing is putting cooling in. You have these massive brick walls. You're partially below grade, so the temperature stays much more constant than it does above grade. But at the end of the day, if that is something that the board wants to do, we would have to redesign the system to incorporate heating as well, and I suspect that it will be more than just the cassette unit would have been, and we're expecting it to be more based on the ductwork because obviously the ductwork costs some money as well. So that's kind of where we stand right now. There's been an evolution of requests that get explored for the hallway proper, and the contractor is kind of waiting for some final direction for the purposes of the, what he should price. And then, just for clarity, and I think I shared this with everyone when we first met, our protocol is that we'll provide a proposal for a clearly defined scope of work. We'll give you a fixed fee so that you know what to budget. And generally speaking, you won't hear from us again. We look for the long-standing relationships, and don't look to change. And so, for example, there are things that are going on in the existing space that we're helping to change out. There was a request for some of the window sills to be looked at, and we're not charging any more for any of that. We do have a proposal before you, and as a courtesy, we actually invested the time already, but the proposal that we presented to you was for the hallway. And I trust that everyone can appreciate, we now have to come back and resurvey an area that we weren't surveying. We have to redesign a system that was not contemplated originally. And so it's when scope changes significantly outside of what we originally agreed to, where we think it's reasonable and fair to come back and be compensated for those. But whether we have a difficult contractor or not, our protocol for 30 years has always been, once we give you a fixed fee, we are a partner with you on that project, and this contractor doing a little bit more, he's doing better and working more with us than some other contractor would have, so that's a good sign. And the miscellaneous stuff that we're looking to deal with on the inside of the space, we're taking care of for you as part of our base services. But that's the only reason you have an additional services proposal as well, because the hallway, and by the way, the incorporation of the alternate one of the flooring in the basement, we didn't charge for. We recognized that was small enough, we incorporated it in there. But that's the reason you have the additional proposal before you as well, because what we're being asked to do is significantly greater than that which we originally agreed to. So that's the status of the hallway's additional components, the proposal, which you didn't ask about, but I figured it tied in, and the project itself.
I just want to mention a couple of things. While this is a hallway, and generally you are correct about hallways not needing heating and cooling, those are generally interior hallways. This hallway is an exterior hallway. Even though it's in the basement, it's on an exterior wall and it's subterranean. Cooling is an issue. Heating is an issue. It may not be as great as an exposed wall, but that wasn't the main issue. The main issue we have there is humidity. And this was clearly discussed back when we first talked about we must condition the hallway, when we realized it wasn't included in the scope. And when we mentioned that the hallway be addressed, we discussed the humidity and that we were running 2 dehumidifiers in there all the time, and that we needed proper airflow to condition the air to make sure that it wasn't a dank, damp space. And that's one of the reasons why we've been going back and forth over the proposals for different types of cassette units, because they just don't circulate the air and they don't get rid of the humidity year-round. So I just wanted to provide some color on that aspect for it. I don't think anyone here disagrees with you that this is an increase in scope. The $388,800 and your initial service fee was for the faculty room and for the tag room and the new HVAC system to support that. But at the same time, you're here, you're designing HVAC systems, actually 2 systems, to handle those spaces. This is relatively small add-on, whether it would be incorporated into the existing HVAC unit or a separate unit. The contractors are here, drawings are developed. This is just adding on a hallway onto a space that's adjacent to a space that you're working. So while there is additional work, and I granted there is, it's just adding a HVAC ductwork. The rest of the hallway remains the same. We're just looking to refreshen the ceiling and paint the walls and replace the flooring. There's really, we're not moving walls and we're not changing elevations, and we're not, other than putting in a double set of doors in the middle of the hallway just to break up the space and keep the kids out of the maintenance area. There's really no real design work. So, can you kind of just explain the work that you would be doing in addition to the work that you've already done?
Oh, sure. So, as a profession, we are often looked at, and there often is a misperception about the amount of work and energy that goes into preparing drawings. And so, while I can appreciate it's just a hallway, the design of a completely different and independent mechanical system requires calculations. It requires a field visit to determine the heights of the ceilings so that the proper equipment can be designed and placed above the ceiling. It requires a connection to the outside air to provide the outside air for the intake of that. The ductwork has to be sized and laid out and coordinated with electric and plumbing and wires in the above existing ceiling. So I'm not sure if what you're trying to communicate to me, that it's just a hallway that we're working next to, is a reflection of the fee that we've provided, and you think the fee is too high for the services we're offering, or that it should get done quicker. I'm not sure in what context you're saying that it's just a hallway, that we're doing the extra work, and it's not like we're knocking down walls.
Well, first of all, you bring up a point. I can go back a couple of steps. I'm surprised that this wasn't being addressed, and we're not getting an additional proposal when we first discussed this back in June. I don't know why we had to wait until now. If we have to pay extra for the additional architectural drawings, then that should have been brought up when we originally said back in June that we have to provide HVAC in the hallway.
You're 100% right.
Okay, and then second of all, while I'm not saying that drawings, I'm not trying to minimize that drawings are important and that engineering calculations have to be done. We discussed this in June when the HVAC engineer hasn't been out yet, and we hadn't received HVAC drawings yet, and most of the work wasn't done yet. So, adding, whether it was an existing system that had an extra 50 feet added to the ductwork, or whether it was 3 units instead of 2 units, I think we should have addressed it at that point rather than come back now and kind of discuss this. And we kind of, it's like it's an abstract add-on project, and I'm having a tough time envisioning, to be honest. I understand where you're coming from. I just don't understand what we're committing ourselves to.
So you are 100% right, and David and I talked about that, and my team took on the responsibility of trying to make you, as our newest client, happy. And for better or worse, they didn't take into consideration the business component of it, and they felt like, we're going to make this client happy. They made a request. We're going to get the drawings done. We're going to go ahead as quickly as possible to do that. So they did create the design to start that second piece to get the proposals. And then as we meet regularly, people in my office get paid. They have insurances. And at the end of the day, we are a business. And when this came to my attention, I pointed out that we are happy, and I'm thrilled that my team took the initiative to ensure that time wasn't lost and that our client was going to be happy. But I did say I think we need to go back to them, because it's only fair that this is outside the scope of that which we were originally retained for, and to negotiate what is a fair and reasonable number, not only for the extra work that we have to do, but the extra liability that we take on as professionals. Because at the end of the day, part of what we take on is not only the expertise that we provide on the projects, but there's liability associated with everything we do. And so I think, I don't remember the exact timeline as it relates to when were we, well, I can tell you that in February is when the proposal was issued for the main project, and I'd have to go back to see when that was actually approved. I don't know if this one is dated, signed or not. No, this one is not. We just made a copy out of the computer. So I don't know when we got that original authorization, but I can put the schedule together. But regardless,
Right.
we were doing what we were doing, and my team took the initiative, and I'm proud of that because they wanted to please a client. I have to step in from a business perspective because we would like to continue to be a viable business, and at the end of the day, that's a function of when we provide an additional service. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but I agree with you 100% that when the additional services were requested of us, our standard protocol should be that when a client asks for additional services, that we write a proposal to them, we explain why those services are outside our original contract, and we have a discussion with them. That did not happen this time. Again, I do want to point out that there were other things requested of us that we never approached you about. We did add, while it's simple, there's a good example, we included into the drawings, a little extra effort to show the flooring that was requested. So that's why this is coming after the fact. You're 100% right. It should have come at the beginning of the project, but I don't want to minimize all the effort that went into it. And in reality, we went from a cassette unit to an air conditioning unit with ductwork, and now we're being asked to consider designing a heating unit into that as well. And so at the end of the day, for what we are offering, there's essentially 3 designs that were being done. I would share a slightly different opinion from you as it relates to the hallway being an exterior hallway. Anything below 3 foot below a frost line has a constant temperature of 55 degrees. And so from a heating perspective, we're not sure that that's as critical an issue in the hallway. But I agree with you 100% that in this day and age, even with hallways above grade that are completely internal, because of the humidity, because of the building envelopes that are so old and the single pane windows that are often still in place, that you are seeing much more humidity inside the buildings, and air conditioning is certainly a good piece. Now, I will offer to you that if dehumidification is the bigger issue, and I think we've designed some of this into the system already,